We live in interesting times, my friends. Didn't think I'd be doing another news video, but today I want to cover something that crossed my desk when I was doing reviews. So I was doing some reviews this morning. This news ended up coming last night, but I just saw it today and started looking at some stuff, started talking to some people in Discord about it, and I wanted to see what you guys thought of it, if you agree, and talk a little bit about the future. And the future is PS5 and the Xbox X Series and what that's all going to come down to, but also some of the side stuff, and that'll be the main crux of today's discussion. Also cover a little bit of tech at the end that I thought was very cool. It was just a little blurb, but something I want to discuss about the future when it comes to cool tech that we're seeing. So why am I bringing this up? Well, as late as last week, the Manchester Sony studio who handles VR, they've done some side stuff. Apparently, they've done some side work on that Blood and Truth, I think, game, the shooter for VR, and done some other VR work. They had originally announced a game, possibly for the PSVR on PS4 and PS5, and then now it sort of seemed like it was moving towards just being a PS5 release. They were looking for a general programmer and a gameplay programmer, both of those for the current game that they were working on. Well, yesterday it was actually announced fairly quickly that they were shuttered. They were closed. First, I want to say, anybody out there, if you've lost your jobs due to this, I'm really sorry for that. Absolutely sucky time to have that happen. And I hope you go out there and I hope you find something right away, get back up on your feet, or I hope there's an internal, reorganization and you get back up without any issues there. It's a pretty crappy time to have that kind of thing happen. So good luck to you guys, you guys and gals. When it comes down to this, there's a reason why I want to talk about it. So when you look at the way these new consoles come out, and especially as Jim Ryan, who's the CEO, has taken over Sony, there's been some changes in focus, and this change in focus and adjustment within the internal structures of Sony itself, and Microsoft to a lesser point, have really caused a lot of concern on a lot of gamers, but in their minds, everything from Sean leaving to just the way everything sort of worked out, some of these moving around, how things were being handled, the lack of actual data that a lot of people think that they're not getting on PS5, even though I would personally say it seems to be about the same number of leaks versus real stuff that we're getting now that we've got in the past. But that's just me. I've lived through enough of these that I don't really worry about them too much or think about them too much. But there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. When you look at a console, and especially it's backed up by Jim, but it's also backed up by Phil Spencer in charge of Xbox and Microsoft, you want to focus on your core strengths. And Jim's made it very clear that what he wants to do is turn PS4 owners into PS5 owners as quickly as possible, quicker than he's ever done so before, or the company as a whole has ever done so before. One of those ways to do that is to restructure the company to be less of an independent territory company and one where all those decisions are made in one particular place. So you've got less of a European, Japanese, and United States style company, and you have one where everything is sort of mashed together so that those people, as he stated in an interview, which I'll read in a bit, aren't all having 3 meetings about the same thing where there's slight variations. Instead, they can all meet. They all know the slight variations there that other teams are handling. And there's better communication. This is sort of a leaner, meaner style, and I think it actually bodes very well for any company going into the future. Microsoft has done some of the same switches. They've certainly purchased some exclusive companies, as well as exclusivity that we are hearing some rumors of. We'll see how that all pans out. So is Sony. But as they move forward, we see this restructure, and we certainly see it under Jim. The reason why I'm going to bring this up is Jim did an interview that I found very interesting, especially when you wrap it around this Manchester studio. This interview was by Christopher Dring, and it's on GameIndustry.biz, and this was on the 7th of November 2019. This was Jim Ryan's response to an article they had already done where they were drawing some ideas out of all these switches, and the fact that there were some people that weren't so happy probably within Sony that maybe informed them, what have you. There was some disenfranchised folks, and they ran an article, and Jim said, hey, I want to talk about it. And so they got him to talk about it, and they talked about the future, and he explained all this. He explained the movement forward and the adjusting and how to focus. What's interesting here is in the entire article, there is one single paragraph, and this is a multi-page article. There's only one paragraph about VR. And for instance, it basically states that they're taking care of Black Friday and Christmas of last year, and that's pretty much where it ends, other than the statement the company remains committed to the category. Why do I bring this up? A lot of people forget that PSVR is its own platform. Let's discuss that just for a second. VR is its own platform. It may be a connected platform to your console or to your PC. Some are not. but it is its own platform. The reason why that is manyfold, but the easiest way to describe it is when you get a console or a PC and you plug it into your monitor, it's going to go to whatever resolution, right? You're going to have scalers that can handle that, your graphics card, all of that kind of things can be handled. When you look at a VR system in particular, it's not just any game can run at any resolution. You plug it in, it figures it out. This is a system where its requirements, its platform requirements are dramatically different than the platform requirements for a pancake version, for a normal screened version. The reason why that is of course, usually with VR, they're looking for 90 FPS versus maybe what a lot of people would hope for on a console. Most console titles is at least 60. They're shooting for at minimum 90 to make it smooth because you are actually doing it for both eyes. This is something that a lot of people don't realize when they say, hey, why don't they just make a VR version? It's not at all how it works. In fact, that's one of the reasons why you see a lot of AAA companies not doing VR games, or you see a VR game being ported and sometimes being sold as a separate title, like Bethesda, where they sold, Fallout VR. Of course, it might just be because Bethesda wants more money, but you get my drift. It's not just a 1, 2, 3 kind of deal. And you don't want them to be. You don't. It is its own platform. We can't sit there and identify and be celebrating that it is its own platform and has its unique possibilities and pluses and negatives, and then pretend like we can instantly just port something. You can't have it both ways. You either have to embrace that it is unique or say that it is not, and it's the common denominator and that there is no differences. But it's not. It is a fully different platform on its own, much like the Kinect. And the reason why I bring up the Kinect is because I feel that Jim and many people at Sony and obviously Microsoft know not to make that mistake again. We see a situation where the Kinect sold number one for, at that time, I don't know if it still is, but it was the number one selling peripheral of all time. So Microsoft made the mistake of saying, oh, guess what? If it's the number one peripheral of all time, people all want it and more people would even get involved in it. That's actually not necessarily true. If you have a type of tire that's very, very popular for your car, it doesn't mean that you will sell more cars by putting that tire on your car. There's various different reasons why that would occur. One is your platform, and really one is that peripheral. One is that side thing. And there's a matter of choice in there and a matter of desire for the consumer to be able to choose if they want that, especially if it adds cost or removes from the initial platform itself, which is what the Xbox did. So it seems to me like Jim is, with this shuttering of this one particular studio and the fact that we're not really hearing a lot of PSVR2 talk. We're seeing some different little patents here and there, but we're not hearing a bunch. My initial impressions on this kind of news is that what's actually going on is that they've made the smart decision to focus on just one or two things with that PS5 release. Maybe even, if not 1 year, possibly 1.5 to 2 years out. I'm assuming 1 year is the most they would want to go, where they would delay it or just not really show it and have it be a huge deal. There's a reason why. When you introduce a new ecosystem, you're always looking at price. There's a couple things you might focus on. You might look at price, you might look at performance. I'm going to say might, but you always would. Then you're going to look at things like services, and when it comes to online, your platform there. And of course, you're going to look at exclusivity, where I think Sony's got, hands down better. Microsoft has done its work trying to get those exclusives, trying to get companies that are offering unique content, but currently I don't think any of us would argue that. However, the price point is a big deal. And when you go into the price point, and this is something that happens with the Index, by the way, which is the Index, the Valve VR, people look at it and go, man, my PC costs this much. It's $1,000 or whatever it is now for an Index. It's another $700. Maybe I'll just get the $250 the Rift or the WMR. When it comes to the PSVR, I personally believe that most of the companies would look at that and say, listen, what we want to do is deliver the PS5 and focus on moving people. The majority, by the way, of people, despite how well the PSVR original sold, we want to move the majority of people from the PS4 to the PS5 as a basic platform. That makes sense. Focus on your cost. Focus on your perceived cost as well. Perceived cost is a big deal. Many of us perceive a cost of the console plus $50. Why? An extra controller. Many of us do that, or a game, right? I think that's pretty much easy to imagine. So you see the $399 price tag, you think in your head $360 because I'm buying a game. $360, I'm buying a controller, because a lot of these systems come with just the one controller. These are all really intrinsic to the way the hardware is going to be delivered to us as gamers, and the way Microsoft, even Nintendo, way all of them really do move forward and make their decisions. I don't see a situation where they want to say, hey, it's $499 for our console. It's also $399 for this better VR, when they're still selling that better VR to such a small group. Now, they could do that. They honestly could. I'm just saying, with these switches that we see with Jim making, the really I would call it lackluster discussion in this entire video. In fact, it's just, yeah, we're still supporting VR, boom, back to streaming. And he just jumps to streaming. There's nothing about even immersive or entertaining environments in VR. It's just like, yeah, we're still doing stuff for this Christmas. And you're like, huh, that's interesting, especially in something that really is, if you guys get a chance, go check this interview out. It's really a very deep interview, and there's a lot of discussion about streaming and that platform. And I think we can all agree, when you look at it, if Microsoft has any success, it's Game Pass. Microsoft's value point is pretty good for people, especially people who don't want to get a PC. Because a lot of people say, well, I have a PC. Well, then that's probably not for you. It is a low-end PC. That is sort of what they're aiming for, and that's fine, and it works. And I think when you look at that, their service and their platform when it comes to online delivery is very high. And Jim made it very clear in this interview that streaming and that platform services are also incredibly high on their focus list. And I really do believe that that's where they're going right now. VR is great. I don't think you'll see anybody stop. I just think, even like Microsoft, where they're like, nobody's really asking for VR in the console. And a lot of people got on Phil Spencer for saying that. They were like, what I'm asking right now. In fact, Microsoft Flight Simulator did not have it built in until Reddit, I think it was Reddit, put together a petition. And that petition went to the company, and they were like, okay, we didn't think you would actually want that. Probably because a lot of people don't think VR is right there yet. And I think that's fair. We've been playing it. I'm playing it, but I would never lie to you and say it's perfect, ever. In fact, I don't think there's been any review of a headset I've done, and I've done many, where I'm like, hey, this is, the thing it's time for you to buy in. It's like, no, whether it be price, whether it be form factor, whether it be the wands, whatever, there's always something, right? But when it comes to consoles, there isn't really something right now, other than, I would say, the overall online infrastructure that Sony has. That's really the only weakness I find them having. Battery power in the PS4 controllers. But I would love to see this be improved. I think this is like an integration of Sony's services, Sony's hardware, Sony's power, their focus. And this, to me, is a super exciting time, because this allows, I believe, for a leaner, meaner choice machine that occurs within Sony. If somebody's complaining about crossplay like they were years ago, where it's like, oh, Xbox is allowing crossplay, Sony won't. We don't know where that was coming from. Here, those kind of complaints, decisions, whatever, can be made in a far quicker lockstep with everybody else, or in a lockstep with everybody else, instead of sort of behind everybody else. And I think we will see that. And I think that that's really exciting. It may bring some changes people don't like. We're hearing the rumors about the PC versions of some PS4 and possibly 5 games. That's something that, as we move into the future, I think Sony's development houses and stuff like that, and people who maybe make second-party Sony games, might look at it and say, hey, listen, in a year, we want to release this on the PC, because that's a whole other market that we're not hitting. It's pretty hard to fight that. So we will see some of those switches as well. But anyway, I thought that was a really interesting, unfortunate discovery to find out that they had been laid off, especially as quickly as that decision had gone from them asking for people to come and apply for jobs, and then boom, yesterday having that closed. That usually indicates, because usually when you are hiring, the company itself, that development house, would think they were continually moving forward. They wouldn't put that stuff forward. And they did put those interviews out. They did start saying they were looking, and then boom. I think it was a week. Yeah. But it was not very long ago when they were asking for employees. So it's unfortunate, but it is a sign of the times. I would like to know what you guys think about just power, price. What do you guys think the price of these consoles will be? I want to know what you guys think of the price. That's the big one. Xbox, PS5, what do you guys think the price will be? And do you think the PSVR will be delayed by a year? I think that we might see that next fall as their big thing, especially if they're doing really, really well. The next bit of news I want to talk about, and you guys know me, I'm a nerd like this, but the next bit of news I want to talk about is actually from WCCF Tech, and they did an interview with a Microsoft employee, but they were talking about PlayFab in and of itself. So Microsoft bought a company called PlayFab, and they're a company that does back-end games via support through the cloud, and they do a lot of middleware techware. And one of the things that they're working on is artificial intelligence upresing of textures. This is a nerdy thing, so if you want to check out, go to the end of the video where I talk about what I'm reviewing next. But just real quick, I want to cover it. It won't take very long. I love this idea. So we've been talking about this for a long time. DSLL or DLSS for NVIDIA has been doing a great job with the anti-aliasing sampling systems that they use, where they use artificial intelligence to sample a game, and they figure out how to get basically better texture or better anti-aliasing with lesser power being used. And now you have things like AMD's got their Radeon sharpening. I can't remember what that filter's called, but it's an AI filter that's a sharpening filter that works really well. NVIDIA's got their own as well, I believe they added. And what these do is these allow for sharpening and improving of a picture, bringing more detail out without all the shimmering effects in those particular cases. But in the artificial intelligence upresing cases, it brings data out of textures that are lower resolution than normal, or lower resolution than you might normally ship. And they're actually they were saying they're actually looking at the possibility of, do we ship like not having 2K by 2K textures and instead have 1K by 1K textures and do a real-time upres. These are interesting to me. I don't want to see AAA games do it, but if you're a big fan like I am of anti-aliasing tech and all the weird stuff, SMA, like all these kind of weird anti-aliasing techs that are very cool and can make a game look better without really impacting it, and yet sometimes you look at it and be like, man, this looks really good and I'm not losing a bunch of frames. That's because of continued improvements in these areas. And this is just one more place where I could see it being used in weird situations like, hey, for example, other than audio, which people don't realize audio is a huge bandwidth killer, but other than audio, textures are one of the biggest places where your bandwidth restrictions would come into play. So the idea of possibly having a game where it's like, do you want the normal version of the game or do you want the high texture pack version of the game? And one is native 4K, one is 2K upres to 4. Now that would be up to you to choose and up to you to decide if you like that idea. I personally do like the idea because some people might be playing on, let's say, a 1080p screen. People don't think that's like the thing. People are still playing on 1440 and 1080p screens. So sometimes we see these weird texture budgets and you're like, what the hell? Other than Bethesda, who ships textures at like cottage cheese detail. I have no clue what they're, I would have to go look. But it's telling, guys, when every single time one of these games comes out, most of the time, the very first mod for like a Bethesda game is a texture detail mod. And many times those textures are actually made by them going in and using various details. They either make their own, and sometimes there are now multiple mods that use anti-aliasing via artificial intelligence and clean them up and send them off. And people really like their look. It's just a cool thing. I think it's awesome as we see this tech move forward. And we see these situations where, one of the things that Phil Spencer got in some shit for, I remember, is he said something like, it's not always about how many polygons, it's how pretty the polygons are. And you saw some, or pixels, he might have said pixels, but you see some people go like, what? But if you understand programming, that kind of stuff makes perfect sense because the data within those matters. And if you can pack more data in there, you color data, what have you, that's one of the ways anti-aliasing can work, is the number of samples it takes. And if you can do those kind of things and you can make these changes and make things more efficient or adjust without the consumer having anything wrong, or noticing anything wrong, and still getting a great looking game, that's sort of cool to me. It's sort of cool to me. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure I want every system to do it, and I don't want 85 add-ons to some game, but I do like the idea. Now, if we could only get them to have a button that would get higher quality audio for some of these games, because man, the number of games like on the Switch with compressed audio is ridiculous. I'd love to see that fixed. But anyway, that's the data for me. Little bits of news. Yes, I know people are like, is he reviewing? Yes, I am. I just reviewed a game and I'm reviewing one now. I love reviewing. Continue to do so. It's very awesome. If you guys get a chance and you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike it, give it a thumbs down. Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. You can follow us on Spotify, iTunes, ACG on Twitch. Remember, every Friday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we do a 2-hour podcast every Friday on Twitch, and we have some cool visitors. We've got, we might have an exclusive or two as well. I just got contacted on something, so that'll be fun to see if that actually pans out. Other than that, that's it. Oh, hey, if anybody gets a chance, check out the chromium.blog. This news just popped up this morning. So Chrome, and this is why it's called the Chromium blog, Chrome, the browser, and Google themselves are working with this ad company that basically decides and finds out what are the best ads and what ads people hate and remove the ads people hate. Interestingly enough, if you go to the Chromium blog, this is something that they're actually, Google and Chrome, all this stuff are actually informing websites. You need to stop using these very particular ads. Unfortunately, most of those ads are the exact ones in YouTube. So you're going to see other YouTubers talking about it. The news just hit this morning, I think. And I saw Carnage, who's a Twitch streamer, talking about it when I was reading the document as well. This is sort of a big deal because it'll probably impact YouTubers once again with something else that is going to hurt us. So if you get a chance, check out my Patreon. I would absolutely appreciate it. If I found you a game or maybe warned you away from some shitty one, Alekine's gun, maybe you can jump into our Discord and stuff like that. We would love to have you, and it helps. And I try to offer service. I try to offer some kind of financial help for you guys, and I hope it works. That's it for me. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.